It was a night that seemed to swallow the world whole. Streets were empty, bathed in the dim glow of flickering streetlights, their orange haze distorted by the downpour. Emma had just moved into her new apartment, a modest unit on the 5th floor of an aging building at the edge of town. The kind of place that smelled faintly of mildew and old carpet, where every creak of the floorboards echoed like a warning. She unpacked slowly, trying to ignore the feeling crawling along her spine. Boxes lined the walls, unopened, casting dark rectangles across the room. The storm outside seemed louder than it should, each raindrop pounding against the glass like a frantic drumbeat. Shadows twisted in the corners, stretching unnaturally whenever lightning streaked across the sky. She told herself it was just the weather, just her imagination. Hours passed, and the storm only worsened. Emma settled into her chair with a cup of tea, seeking some comfort. That's when she saw it. Across the hall, pressed against the window of the neighboring apartment, a face, pale, distorted, hollow eyes staring directly at her. Her fingers froze around the mug. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Lightning flashed, and when she blinked, it was gone. She laughed nervously, telling herself she was imagining things. Old building, shadows, stress from moving, but the unease in her chest refused to dissipate. Then came the soft knock on her door, hesitant, deliberate. Emma called out, voice trembling, "Hello?" Silence. Then a whisper, so soft it was almost beneath the rain. "I see you!" Her heart leapt into her throat. She backed away, fumbling for her phone. Dead. No signal, no battery. The room seemed to shrink, shadows pressing closer, almost breathing. The knocking grew louder, echoing unnaturally as if mocking her fear. She crept toward the peephole, trembling. Nothing, just the dimly lit hallway. Then a faint scraping sound at the window. She turned slowly. The face was inside the apartment now, pressed against the bedroom window. Its grin was wide, too wide, teeth jagged and yellowed. Hollow black eyes stared into hers, cold and empty. Every instinct screamed to run, but her legs refused to obey. Emma bolted for the door, throwing her weight against it, locking it in a desperate panic. She could hear it moving, circling her room, whispering, laughing. Every flash of lightning revealed it closer than before. Shadows leapt across the walls, and the air grew icy cold. Hours passed in darkness, broken only by flashes of lightning that revealed fleeting glimpses of the figure. Emma's thoughts raced. Is it human? A ghost? Something worse? Every creak, every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. Her own heartbeat echoed louder than the storm outside. Morning eventually came. The storm had passed. The police arrived after concerned neighbors reported strange noises. But when they entered the apartment, it was empty. No sign of Emma. Her belongings untouched, her teacup cold and full. Windows shattered from the inside. "I've been inside all along." Neighbors reported seeing lights flickering in the apartment the night before, lights that shouldn't have been on. Some swear they heard whispers too soft to understand. Others claim to have glimpsed a pale, distorted face staring from the shattered windows, only to vanish when approached. Story 2. The Reflection. Tom had always been fascinated by antiques, not the charming trinkets or delicate porcelain, but objects with history, with secrets. That's why, when he stumbled upon a tall, ornate mirror at a small curio shop tucked between two crumbling buildings, he couldn't resist. Its frame was carved with twisted vines and strange symbols he didn't recognize. The glass itself slightly warped, as if it had absorbed centuries of secrets. At home, he placed the mirror in his living room, leaning it against the wall. He admired it, unaware of the faint shiver crawling up his spine. That night, he noticed something strange. His reflection lagged, slightly behind his movements, and sometimes it smiled when he didn't. At first, Tom laughed nervously. Just his imagination. The mirror was old. Warped glass played tricks on the mind. But as days passed, the reflection began doing things he wasn't doing, tilting its head when he stood still, taking a step closer when he was far away, mouthing words he couldn't hear. One night he awoke to darkness. The mirror stood in the corner, perfectly still. But he could hear it. Faint breathing, slow and deliberate, echoing in the room. Tom's pulse quickened. He approached the mirror cautiously, heart hammering, and for a moment the room was silent. Then the reflection moved independently. Its eyes, black voids, stared back at him, and it smiled, slowly, maliciously. Terrified, Tom backed away. The lights flickered. The room seemed to expand, shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. He reached for his phone to call for help. It wouldn't turn on. No signal, no battery, just the mirror, reflecting a world that seemed darker, colder. Days passed, and the mirror's influence grew stronger. Objects in his apartment subtly shifted when he wasn't looking. Furniture moved just slightly, photographs crooked on the walls, and every time he glanced into the mirror, the figure was closer, its smile wider, its eyes darker. One evening, unable to resist, Tom stood in front of it, staring. And then he noticed something terrifying. Behind him in the room, the shadows moved, shapes forming, twisting, reaching. When he spun around, nothing, but the reflection in the mirror didn't lie. Behind him, the shadows lingered, their forms vaguely humanoid, shifting closer with each heartbeat. He tried to cover the mirror, draping a sheet over it, but the next morning, the sheet was shredded, tiny scratches etched into it, as if someone or something had struggled to get through. His reflection was still there, smiling, waiting. Late that night, Tom awoke to a soft whisper. "You can't leave." He bolted upright. The mirror now reflected not his living room, but a dark corridor, endless and black with flickering shadows moving within. His reflection stepped forward, and then, Tom realized in horror, it had stopped smiling at him. Tom ran from the apartment, leaving the mirror behind. When the neighbors entered the unit the next day, the apartment appeared normal. The mirror still leaned against the wall, untouched. But some swear that at night, if the lights are off and the wind blows just right, you can see the reflection move, even when no one stands before it. And occasionally, if you look closely, you'll see a shadow behind the figure in the glass, waiting for you. It was smiling at something behind him. Story 3. The Elevator. Lila worked late nights at a corporate tower downtown. She had always preferred the solitude of the office at night, the empty hallways, the quiet hum of computers, the faint scent of coffee lingering in the break room. But there was one thing that had always unnerved her: the elevator. Its metallic walls, cold and sterile, seemed to amplify every sound, every creak of the building settling. One night, she entered the elevator after a particularly long shift. Pressing the button for the lobby, she noticed the floor display flicker oddly. 13. Not unusual, and the building had skipped numbers before. But then the doors opened. On the 13th floor. No buttons pressed, no light, just darkness, a whisper. "Come in." Her breath caught. She hesitated, feeling the chill of the unlit hallway, the metallic scent of the elevator mixing with something else. Something faintly coppery, like blood. Lila's hand trembled as she stepped forward, curiosity and fear battling in her chest. The doors closed behind her with a metallic clang, and the display began flashing wildly. 13, 66, 999. Each number slower, each flash longer, like counting her final seconds. The elevator shuddered, groaning as if alive. Shadows twisted along the walls, coiling and shifting in impossible angles. Lila pressed the buttons frantically. Nothing worked. She felt a presence behind her. Turning slowly, the mirrored wall reflected not her. There was a figure there, tall, impossibly thin, with hollow eyes and a grin too wide to be human. Its head tilted unnaturally, moving in a way that defied anatomy. Panic surged through her. She ran to the corner, pressed against the mirrored wall, hoping it would disappear. But every reflection she saw was watching, waiting, smiling. The numbers continued to flash. Suddenly, doors began appearing inside the elevator walls. Dozens of doors, some ajar, revealing nothing but endless darkness. Through one, she glimpsed a long hallway lined with closed doors, and behind one a faint flicker, her own face screaming. She tried to force open the elevator doors. They wouldn't budge. The shadows moved closer, coiling around the elevator like smoke. Lila's breath came in ragged gasps. Every sound was amplified. her heartbeat pounding, her nails scraping the metal walls, the whispering voices, now hundreds, all calling her name. She pressed every button randomly, hoping to escape, when suddenly the elevator jolted violently. The mirrors rippled, like water disturbed, revealing corridors she had never seen in the building. Long, endless hallways, each lined with more doors, stretching into a darkness that seemed to devour light. And through one of the doors, she saw herself, or something that looked like her. Its eyes black, its grin wider than possible, staring directly at her. The elevator lurched once more and then stopped. The doors slid open slowly. She expected the lobby, expected safety, but instead, a different building entirely. Broken floors, shattered windows, and long shadows that stretched impossibly far. The smell of damp decay filled the air. Her footsteps echoed as she tried to make sense of it. Where had the elevator taken her? And then she heard it. A soft, deliberate clap. Behind her, shadows began moving, taking shape, forming figures with hollow eyes and distorted grins. She ran, doors opening and closing in impossible sequences, hallways twisting like the inside of a nightmare. Eventually, she stumbled through a set of doors that led outside, or at least what appeared to be outside. The building was gone. Only fog, dim streetlights, and the feeling of being sand-watched. She turned, heart hammering, and saw the elevator doors, standing alone in the middle of the empty street, polished, metallic, and silent. She never returned to the building. But sometimes when the wind is still and the streets are empty, Lila swears she can hear the faint ding of an elevator arriving, and a whisper calling her name from inside. Story 4. The Forgotten Child. The old orphanage at the edge of town had been abandoned for decades. Children whispered its name like a curse, warning each other to stay away. The stories told of a child who vanished without a trace, a tiny soul that was never meant to leave. Alex, a thrill-seeker with a fascination for the macabre, decided one stormy night that he would explore it himself. He approached the building through a narrow, overgrown path. The wind tugged at his jacket, carrying with it the smell of decay and wet earth. The orphanage loomed ahead, broken windows, peeling paint, and a set of massive wooden doors hanging on their hinges. He hesitated for a moment, listening. At first there was only the wind, then soft crying, a child's cry, muffled and distant, yet impossibly close. Alex pushed open the doors and stepped inside. Dust hung in the air like a fog, swirling around the broken furniture and decaying floorboards. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with remnants of the past. Torn curtains, faded photographs of smiling children, rusted cribs, and abandoned toys. The crying grew louder as he moved forward, guiding him to a locked nursery. The door creaked open as if pushed by unseen hands. Inside, the room was empty. A single crib sat in the center, rocking slightly, though there was no wind. The toys on the floor began to move on their own, rolling into circles, forming shapes, pointing toward the crib. Alex felt his stomach twist in dread. Then it happened. A tiny hand clutched his ankle. He spun around, heart hammering. Nothing. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to ripple, shifting, stretching toward him. A soft voice whispered from everywhere and nowhere, "Stay forever." Alex ran, stumbling through hallways that seemed to stretch endlessly. Doors slammed behind him, and faint laughter echoed through the building, light and sinister. Every time he thought he'd reached the exit, the hallway twisted, leading him deeper into the orphanage. The crying followed, growing louder, blending with whispers and soft giggles that felt like claws on his mind. Finally, he reached the main hall, thinking he was free. But when he looked around, the front doors were gone. The windows revealed only darkness outside, and shadows moved just beyond the broken glass, following him with impossible speed. Panic clawed at his chest. The whispers merged into a chorus of voices, all calling his name, all laughing. A faint glow appeared at the end of the hall. Alex approached cautiously, heart pounding. In the center of the room was a small figure, the missing child from the legends. Its eyes were black voids, its smile unnaturally wide. The crib now held dozens of tiny, shadowed figures, all staring at him. Alex tried to back away. The child reached out a hand impossibly fast and touched his arm. He felt a coldness spread through him, deep and paralyzing, as if his soul were being drawn toward the crib. He screamed, but no sound escaped. The shadows closed in, surrounding him, lifting him off the ground. Morning came. Locals found the orphanage empty, as if no one had entered for decades. But some say that when the wind blows through the broken windows, you can hear soft crying, whispers, and the sound of tiny footsteps, as if Alex had become just another voice trapped in the orphanage, calling out to anyone foolish enough to enter. Story 5. The Last Call. Jenna worked the graveyard shift at a small city call center. The building was silent after midnight, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly above her desk. It was the kind of quiet that pressed against your ears, making every tiny sound unnaturally loud. The hum of the air conditioner, the distant buzz of the elevator, even the scratching of her own pen against paper. At exactly 3:13 a.m., her phone rang. An unknown number. Normally she would have ignored it, but something compelled her to answer. "Hello," she said, voice tight, static, and then a whisper. "I'm inside your house." Jenna froze. Her heart thudded against her chest. She checked the locks, all secure, no one should be there. The whisper came again, closer this time, almost behind her. "I can see you." She hung up. The line went dead. But then, the phone rang again, same number. Each time, the voice grew clearer, each word more deliberate. "I'm watching. Don't move." Panic set in. She could feel her pulse racing, the office suddenly colder, darker, even though the lights were on. She grabbed her jacket and rushed to the front door, locked. The exit doors had been secured for the night. She wasn't alone. Jenna backed toward her desk, eyes scanning the empty room. The fluorescent lights flickered violently. Then she saw it. A figure in the reflection of the glass window, pale and unnaturally still, standing behind her desk. Its head tilted slowly, and its hollow eyes locked onto hers, its grin stretched wider than humanly possible. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the phone, but it wasn't in her hand. Instead, it lay on the desk, screen glowing, displaying the same number. The static whispered again, "You answered. Now you belong." Jenna ran to the corner office, hoping to barricade herself. The shadows in the room shifted unnaturally, stretching toward her. Every time she turned a corner, she thought she saw a door, a hallway. But when she approached, it was gone. The building seemed endless, morphing around her, trapping her in a nightmare loop. She reached the server room, thinking she could call someone from the backup lines, but the monitors were on, displaying footage of the office, and her own terrified face, except the figure was behind her in every frame, closer, always smiling. Panic became paralysis. The whispers turned into a cacophony, voices overlapping, each claiming, "You shouldn't have answered." Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed to warp. Jenna stumbled through corridors that appeared empty, but were filled with faint shadows brushing against her skin. Then the phone rang again. She froze, knowing she had no choice but to pick it up. "Hello?" Her voice barely audible. The whisper was in her ear this time. "You belong to us now." She turned to run, and the figure emerged from the shadows, gliding silently, impossibly fast, blocking every exit. Its grin stretched unnaturally wide, teeth gleaming in the flickering light. Jenna screamed, but no sound escaped her lips. The shadows engulfed her, merging with her own form, dragging her into the darkness. Morning came. The building was quiet. The office lights flickered on, revealing an empty room. No trace of Jenna. Only her phone remained, lying on the desk, screen glowing with the last call, unanswered. Some employees say the building now whispers at night, soft static over the phone lines, and if you answer, a pale figure watches from the screen, waiting for the next shift worker foolish enough to pick up. Story 6. The Haunted Painting. When Mark inherited his grandmother's old Victorian house, he didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. The house smelled of old wood, dust and lavender, a scent that carried decades of memories. Among the relics of the past was a painting tucked away in the attic, a portrait of a man in old-fashioned clothes, eyes dark, hand hollow, staring as if he could see into the depths of your soul. At first, Mark admired it as a piece of art, a curious heirloom from a bygone era. But soon, he noticed subtle changes. Each morning, the man's eyes seemed a fraction closer to his own, more aware, more alive. Shadows in the room shifted unnaturally, drawn toward the painting. At night, the figure appeared to move, tilting his head slightly, smiling in ways that weren't there during the day. Mark laughed nervously, convincing himself it was the angle of the light, the tricks of his imagination. But then he noticed the small details changing. The hand that rested on the frame now seemed to grip it tighter, the background darkened, corners curling inward like something reaching out. One stormy night, Mark woke to a soft tapping. The painting, hanging in the hall, was rattling against the wall even though no wind could reach the interior. He approached cautiously, heart pounding. Lightning flashed, illuminating the man's face, twisted now with an unnatural grin. Mark reached out, and the instant his fingers brushed the frame, a coldness shot through his arm. The eyes in the painting followed him as he stumbled backward. A whisper, soft and sibilant, brushed past his ear. "You see me. Now I see you." Terrified, he covered the painting with a sheet. That night, he awoke to scratching sounds, as if claws were digging through fabric. The sheet moved on its own, shifting and writhing. When he threw it off, the painting had changed. The man's grin was wider, his eyes black pits, and the hand now extended slightly toward the viewer, toward Mark. Mark tried to leave the house, but every exit seemed blocked. Doors led to walls. Windows reflected only darkness. Panic overtook him as the house itself seemed alive, walls bending, shadows writhing, whispering, echoing his every fear. Over the next week, the painting's changes escalated. Each morning, Mark noticed more subtle details. The figure's hand creeping further out of the frame, the eyes following him into every room, even appearing in reflective surfaces where the painting itself wasn't present. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. "Join me. Stay forever." Mark tried burning the painting. Smoke filled the room instantly, black and choking, and when he looked again, the painting was untouched, hanging neatly on the wall, the man's eyes glinting maliciously in the candlelight. Desperate, Mark called an expert in the supernatural. When the medium arrived, he refused to enter the room alone. After hours of chanting and rituals, he finally stepped back, pale and shaking. "It's not bound to this frame alone," he said. "It's bound to the house, and it's hungry for you." That night, Mark awoke to find the painting at the foot of his bed. The man's hollow eyes locked onto him, the grin impossibly wide. The hand reached from the canvas, brushing against Mark's arm, cold and suffocating. He screamed, and in the next instant, the painting returned to the wall, empty bed, no hand, just the man staring, waiting. Story 7. The Whispering Attic. Ever since moving into her grandmother's old house, Claire felt an unease she couldn't explain. The home was charming in daylight, with floral wallpaper, polished floors, and sunlight spilling through lace curtains. But at night, shadows stretched unnaturally. Floorboards groaned in protest, and the air felt heavy, thick with something unspoken. The attic had always been off-limits, a place locked with an old brass key that her grandmother warned her never to use. "Some things belong in the dark," she said. But curiosity gnawed at Claire relentlessly. She could hear faint noises at night, whispers, soft scratching, even the occasional muffled giggle that seemed to echo from the ceiling above. One stormy evening, alone in the house, Claire found the key tucked in an old drawer. Her hands trembled as she inserted it into the attic lock. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a narrow staircase that disappeared into shadows. She hesitated but climbed, each step groaning under her weight. The air grew colder with every step, and the whispering grew louder, though still just beyond comprehension. The attic was cluttered with decades of forgotten possessions, dusty trunks, moth-eaten blankets, old furniture draped in yellowed sheets. But what drew her attention were the walls, covered in faint scratch marks and childlike drawings, some depicting stick figures with hollow eyes and wide, unnatural grins. The whispers intensified as she stepped deeper. Then she heard her name, soft, slow, deliberate. Claire. Her pulse jumped. She spun around. Nothing. Just shadows, shifting in the corners, twisting unnaturally. She tried to convince herself it was her imagination, that the storm outside was playing tricks on her senses. A small chest caught her eye, dusty, locked, its surface scratched with letters she couldn't decipher. She forced it open. Inside was a single, worn doll, porcelain cracked and missing one eye. A faint giggle echoed through the attic. Claire dropped the doll and it rolled across the floor, stopping at the base of the staircase as if beckoning her to follow. Terrified but compelled, Claire moved toward it. The whispers now formed words. "Come play. Stay with us." Her footsteps faltered. The shadows shifted closer, taking on forms vaguely human but grotesque, elongated. One reached out, brushing against her arm, cold as ice, and she stumbled backward, heart pounding. Suddenly the attic seemed to stretch, walls bending, ceilings rising impossibly high. Doors appeared where there were none, opening into dark corridors that led to nowhere. The whispers became a chorus, dozens of voices overlapping. "We can see you. We know you're here, don't leave." Claire ran toward the stairs, but every time she tried to descend, the staircase extended, twisting, leading her deeper into the attic. The doll's cracked eye seemed to follow her, gleaming faintly in the dim light. Her hands clutched the banister, but it was slippery, cold, as if frozen. A voice, small and childlike, whispered, "You're ours now." Panic surged as she reached for the door again, only to find it blocked by a shadowy figure. Its eyes hollow, grin impossibly wide. The whispers turned into laughter, sinister and echoing. Claire screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the walls. The shadows enveloped her, tugging, pulling, until she felt herself merging with the darkness, becoming just another whisper in the chorus. Morning came. The attic appeared as it always had, dusty, empty, silent. No trace of Claire remained. But neighbors swear that sometimes at night, if the wind blows through the vents just right, you can hear a faint, desperate voice calling her name. And some claim that a small cracked doll appears at the foot of the staircase, rolling slowly as if inviting the next curious soul. Story 8. The Doll in the Woods. It was a summer evening when 4 friends decided to camp deep in the forest just outside town. The woods were dense, shadowed, and silent in a way that pressed against the ears, making every sound, a snapping twig, a rustling leaf, feel unnervingly loud. As they set up their tents, Ryan wandered off, drawn by the eerie beauty of the forest under the fading sun. That's when he saw it, a porcelain doll sitting upright on a fallen tree, its dress faded and dirty, its one glassy eye reflecting the last rays of sunlight. Odd, because the woods were miles from civilization. Ryan picked up the doll. Its cracked porcelain face was cold and unnervingly lifelike. When he turned it over, he noticed a small note tucked into its dress. "Play with me." He laughed nervously, showing it to his friends. "Creepy," said Sarah. "Let's just leave it here." But Ryan, holding the doll, insisted they take it to the campsite. That night, as the friends sat around the campfire, strange things began to happen. The doll appeared in different spots, on the logs, leaning against a tree, sometimes staring out from the shadows. None of them had moved it. Around midnight, Ryan awoke to the sound of soft giggles. He thought it was a prank by his friends, but they were asleep. The giggles grew louder, echoing around the campsite. Then he noticed the doll standing near the edge of the clearing, perfectly upright, its glassy eye reflecting the firelight. "Guys, wake up," he whispered. But the others stirred only groggily. When he turned back, the doll was closer. Not lying down, not leaning, standing. Its grin seemed wider, more sinister. Ryan stumbled back toward the tent, but the doll followed, gliding silently over the forest floor, never touching the leaves. Panic set in. The friends grabbed flashlights, shining them on the doll, but it disappeared each time they looked directly at it. And in the distance they could hear whispers, faint but clear. "Stay. Stay forever." They ran toward the car parked at the edge of the woods, the doll somehow always ahead, waiting, moving silently through the undergrowth. Every path they tried led them in circles. The forest seemed alive, guiding them back to the doll. Their panic grew with every step. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt meaningless. Eventually, they saw the headlights of a distant road. Relief washed over them, but as they reached the clearing, the doll was gone. The wind carried a soft, chilling giggle, and a single glassy eye glimmered from the tree line before vanishing. Ryan tried to leave, never looking back, but the next morning, in their photos from the night before, the doll appeared in every shot. In the shadows behind them, peeking from trees, even sitting in the back of their car. its grin wider in each picture, eyes following them, whispering promises of a return. Locals tell stories of campers who disappear in those woods. Sometimes the only evidence is a cracked porcelain doll left upright on a fallen tree, waiting for the next group brave or foolish enough to enter. Story 9. The Stalker in the Fog. It was a late autumn night when Daniel left work. The streets were empty, the city swallowed by a dense, unnatural fog. Streetlights glowed dimly, their halos blurred, and the mist seemed to swallow every sound except his own footsteps. He felt a chill creeping up his spine, though he couldn't explain why. As he walked, he noticed a figure in the distance, barely visible through the fog. A tall man dressed in dark clothing, standing perfectly still on the sidewalk. Daniel quickened his pace, thinking it was someone else leaving work late. But as he passed a street lamp, he realized the figure was following him, not casually but deliberately, keeping pace with his every step. Daniel's heart began to pound. He turned into a side street, hoping to lose the figure, but the fog was disorienting. Every alley looked the same, every street lamp a ghostly duplicate. The figure remained, a shadow among shadows, moving silently, never breaking pace. He pulled out his phone, dialing a friend. No signal. Panic surged. He tried running, weaving through the foggy streets, but the man always appeared ahead of him, as if he knew where Daniel would turn before he did. Daniel ducked into a narrow passage between two buildings, thinking he could hide. The figure stopped at the entrance, but a faint, low chuckle echoed through the mist, sending a shiver down his spine. He pressed himself against the wall, holding his breath. When he dared to peek, the figure was gone, but the fog moved unnaturally, curling like tendrils, and he could hear soft, deliberate footsteps all around him, circling, waiting. Hours seemed to pass. Daniel stumbled into an abandoned park, the fog thickening, the air colder. In the distance, he could just make out swings swaying, though no wind blew. And there, standing on the playground, was the figure again. Its face was obscured, featureless, yet Daniel felt eyes piercing his very soul. A whisper drifted through the fog. "You can't hide." He tried to run again, but every path led him back to the same park. The fog disoriented him, bending the streets, stretching the city into an impossible labyrinth. Panic turned to terror as he realized he wasn't just being followed. He was trapped, guided by something beyond human understanding. Daniel's phone rang suddenly, a sound he hadn't heard in hours. He answered frantically. Static. Then a voice, low and guttural, almost human, almost not. "I'm closer than you think." He turned a corner, and the figure was there again, impossibly close. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet on invisible strings. It raised a hand, pointing directly at Daniel, and then without warning it vanished, leaving only a shadow that clung to his back, cold and heavy. Exhausted, terrified, Daniel stumbled into a dimly lit alley and collapsed. When he looked up, the fog had cleared slightly, revealing a street he recognized, the way home. But something was off. The city was too quiet, too still, and in every reflective surface, shop windows, puddles, car mirrors, he saw the figure watching, waiting, grinning behind him. Daniel never saw the man physically again, but the whispers lingered, soft and constant, drifting through the corners of his mind. "We will find you, and we are always watching." Some say the fog never really left that night, and some say that anyone who walks alone after midnight, through thick fog, might just see the same shadow silently following, eternally patient. Story 10. The House on Hollow Hill. For as long as anyone could remember, the house on Hollow Hill had been abandoned. Locals whispered of screams that carried down the hillside on stormy nights, of lights flickering behind boarded-up windows, and of figures glimpsed through shattered glass. It was said that no one who stayed overnight ever returned the same, if they returned at all. Ethan, a journalist with a taste for the supernatural, decided that the legend of Hollow Hill would be his next story. Armed with a flashlight, a notebook, and a sense of defiance, he approached the mansion one rainy evening. The air was thick with mist, the wind carrying the smell of damp earth and decay. The front door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, the house smelled of mold and old wood. Dust motes floated in the dim beam of his flashlight. The grand staircase was broken in places, floorboards sagging, walls lined with peeling wallpaper. But the strangest thing was the silence, not the absence of sound, but the feeling of being watched. He explored room by room, noting strange markings on the walls, scratches, scrawled letters and symbols he couldn't understand. Doors slammed shut behind him without warning. He could hear whispers, distant but clear. "Leave while you can." In the attic, he found an old rocking chair. It moved slowly back and forth, though there was no breeze. On the floor were dozens of photographs, all faded, all depicting the same house. And in every photo, a shadowy figure could be seen standing in a window, always watching. Ethan's flashlight flickered. A cold chill swept the room. Then he heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, approaching from the hallway below. He called out, but there was no response, only the echo of his own voice. He decided to descend, but the staircase seemed longer, twisting unnaturally. Shadows stretched across the walls, moving independently, forming shapes that weren't there before. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into a chorus. "You shouldn't be here. You belong to us." Suddenly, he saw a figure at the bottom of the stairs, pale, hollow-eyed, grinning unnaturally wide. It raised its hand, beckoning him downward. Ethan froze, his heartbeat loud in his ears. The figure took a step forward. Another. The floor beneath it didn't creak. It moved silently, gliding closer. Panicked, Ethan ran through the house, doors opening to rooms that weren't there before. Hallways bent impossibly, ceilings stretched, shadows chasing him from every corner. The whispers turned into laughter, echoing and overlapping, voices from children, adults, and something inhuman. He reached the main hall, hoping to escape through the front door. But it had vanished. In its place, a wall of darkness pulsated, as if the house itself had become a living, breathing entity. The shadows closed in, forming twisted, human-like shapes, all grinning, all reaching toward him. Ethan stumbled into the basement, seeking any escape. There he saw dozens of figures, pale and hollow-eyed, staring at him from the shadows. They whispered his name in unison. "You are ours." He realized then that the house never let anyone leave. It didn't just trap them physically, it trapped their very souls. Hours or perhaps minutes passed. The storm outside grew stronger. The house groaned as if alive, its walls bending, floors shifting. Ethan screamed, but no sound escaped. He felt himself pulled into the shadows, cold and suffocating, until he became just another whisper in the house, one more figure among the grinning, hollow-eyed residents of Hollow Hill.